Hey, this is in response to Gratex about a series of videos that he's done, which I'll link to, which could be described as an assertion that science is dogmatic towards its accepted theory. In particular, Gratex has chosen a video which resurrects and mangles an old rejected geologic idea from the 1960s, which is called the expanding Earth hypothesis, as the foundation of his argument. Now, Gratex points to the negative comments on this video as showing the closed-mindedness and religious-like dogmatism of people that he labels as scientific rationalists. Now, unfortunately for Gratex, the video he holds up as an example of the dogmatism of science is by Neal Adams, purporting that the plate tectonic theory, which is the unifying paradigm of earth sciences currently today, is wrong, and instead proposes this goofy and whimsical expanding Earth hypothesis as the model which describes Earth's surface features correctly. The reason it's unfortunate Gratex chose this video is because the expanded Earth hypothesis as presented in Adams's video is bullshit, and that is quackery or proposing something ignorant and ignoring facts, I guess. You know, I'll just say, I think if any reasonable and intelligent person does the work, he'll come to the conclusions that the plate tectonic theory is the most apt in the world today for describing near-surface Earth features. And by work, I mean doing the literature, doing the math, and confirming observations. And that takes time, not surfing the internet one afternoon. You know, a contrarian fringe, an educated contrarian fringe, will undoubtedly persist until the tsunami of evidence finally silences their egos in the night. But I think we can see which way this train is going. And I actually think Gratex has come to the conclusion that plate tectonics is the most apt model, but is being coy to defend his larger point. I'll do a bit of slamming of the expanding Earth hypothesis at the end, I hope. But I want to get at this assertion that theories in science are dogmatic and try to tackle the larger, more important issue of the view of science as dogma and how it plays out in society. Society's use of science in the world today. You know, first off, I hope we can all agree that the theory is just a consensus, that a certain model has merit and truth among the workers in the field. And this is important because in thinking about science, the only dogma I could come up with, and I would dare say that most scientists would have the same view, is that the consensuses we hold today will either become more refined or tossed aside by the consensuses of tomorrow. There will be a continuing evolution, a change in our understanding of the world. For example, evolution, you know, getting right there, as proposed by Darwin at the macro level scale, is wrong, I would say, in most of the details, but it's right overall. The general concept still holds. Gratex brought up how we thought the Earth was the center of the universe, and then we realized that the Earth rotate around the sun, and the sun rotates around the galactic core, and now we find that the galaxies are supposed to be heading off into oblivion. And who knows, the model may change over time, but we'll be ready for it in science. So I don't think that the concept that our belief and description of the physical world will become more complete and correct over time to be a particularly dogmatic one. And if it is dogmatic, then it's somewhat ironic. Now, my concern is how this skepticism is interpreted by society, in particular what actions and outcomes might occur by the rejections and conclusions of science. You know, if we toss the plate tectonic theory for an incorrect hypothesis like the expanding Earth a bit, the only people affected would be resource extraction geologists, earthquake and volcano hazard forecasters, and a myriad of researchers in academia. But the world would go on, you know, so what? But there are important questions raised by science which have a far lesser degree of consensus than plate tectonics, which demand culture-changing actions. But this action is hampered by the requirement of overall skepticism that Gratex insists we inject into the result of the scientific method. You know, for example, such a question would be, is man's release of terrestrial carbon into the atmosphere and the absorption of that carbon into the oceans changing climate patterns in significant ways, and do those changes threaten biodiversity and ultimately our survival on this planet? And for the record, my answer would be yes on all three of those questions, with diminishing degrees of certainty as you work down the list. You know, but by Gratex's anti-science doctrines, we should give equal or ample considerations to those who argue against the evidence of man-made climate change. And we see the tangled knots in democratic societies this can have, because in our societies, even the ignorant are supposed to have opinions about the merits of any question. Thus, such doubts towards science can be used to prevent action. To illustrate this point, I'm going to read a paragraph from a book, and it's this one. It's on Bullshit by Harry G. Frankfurt. The contemporary proliferation of bullshit also has deeper sources in various forms of skepticism which deny that we can have any reliable access to an objective reality, and which therefore reject the possibility of knowing how things truly are. These anti-realist doctrines undermine confidence in the value of disinterested efforts to determine what is true and what is false, and even in the intelligibility of the notion of objective inquiry. One response to this loss of confidence has been a retreat from the discipline required by dedication to the ideal of correctness to a quite different sort of discipline, which is imposed by the pursuit of an alternate ideal of sincerity. Rather than seeking primarily to arrive at accurate representations of a common world, the individual turns toward trying to provide honest representations of himself, convinced that reality has no inherent nature, which he might hope to identify as the truth about things. He devotes himself to being true to his own nature. It is as though he decides that since it makes no sense to try to be true to the facts, he must therefore try to be true to himself. I don't think it's any secret. Gratex has a problem with belief in absolute truth. But there are many simple truths out there that are correct and true and objective, and they have profound consequences on ethical and decisions and our understanding of the world. I'll give you two. There were no significant weapons of mass destruction in Iraq prior to U.S. invasion in 2003. And all the Apollo missions that said they landed on the moon, landed on the moon. Well, in the first case, you know, in the United States, you'll find people say that, well, they'll be ignorant, or they'll say that Saddam moved his non-existent weapons of mass destruction into Syria. That's not what happened. There were no weapons of mass destruction. So whether your your ethics are based on objective or subjective means, we had no moral justification for going into Iraq. The Apollo one, I picked because it relates to this question of the expanding Earth theory, is that we know the moon's been quiescent for 3.8 billion years, and it formed about 4.3. So why isn't the moon expanding? Anyway, and the other one is the Apollo missions. People who believe the Apollo missions was a hoax, that tends to be Eurocentric, and just shows you ignorant people are everywhere. Anyway, so there are important simple truths out there that are objectively correct, and that is not to say that our understanding will ever be absolute and that mystery will not always exist beyond our limits of comprehension. Finally, I should mention some of what Gratex says has value, and if you were to tack to his argument to say the history of how we came to believe in Alvarez's theory of the comet impact at the Cretaceous tertiary boundary, I probably wouldn't have made this video. You know, that theory came out in 1980, and by accumulated multi-directional evidence moved from hypothesis to accepted theory within 15 years. So what I'm trying to say here is not that Gratex's assertion that the truth is not objectively knowable is bullshit, but rather Gratex's assertion fosters a climate where bullshit can thrive, which within the confines of my argument is bullshit. Okay, I'm going to leave that there, and I'm going to do my top 3 reasons that Neal Adams' expanding Earth hypothesis is wrong as we know the world today. There's many more, I'm sure. The first, number 1, of course, show me how the evidence, or show me the evidence that matter is spontaneously created within the Earth, and I assure you scientists will flock back to the expanded Earth hypothesis, but I predict you no one ever will show that. Neal Adams says there are no subduction zones, which, given I was born and live on a subduction zone, particularly pissed me off. I spent a good portion of my life on subduction zones of the Aleutians, Japan, Java, and the Caribbean. They exist. You know, in Adams's all continental crust, the breakup began 65 million years ago. We have absolute age dates. We know that that was 225 million years ago. And finally, the reason geologists hold on to defend plate tectonic theory with such vehemence is that it has an elegant correctness. Within the plate tectonic theory, as details change and the complexity of the model increases, there is nothing presented that insists we toss the general theory. That is, bullshit is not required.